Hey there, in today's video I'm going to tell you how you can run the Boston Marathon without setting a qualifying time. I'm making this video because lots of runners missed out on running in the Boston Marathon 2024. It happens in most years. This year 11,000 runners who Boston qualified were not accepted for the marathon. And this video I wanted to show you ways to get in that didn't involve qualifying and for which 6,000 people on average run the Boston Marathon every year. Some of the ways in are obvious, some not so obvious, and for those chasing a 6-star medal, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. As always, there are chapter markers down below, so you can skip on through to the bits you might be interested in. Let's get going. To look at the marathon, first of all, let's see the field size. So there are 30,000 people who run the Boston Marathon every year. That's capped by logistics, transportation, all those kinds of things. And this year, 33,058 runners applied who had met the qualifying time in their age and gender bracket. Of those, 22,019 were accepted, which is about 2/3 of the qualified applicants. And therefore, 11,039, or about another third, qualified applicants were unable to be offered a place in the Boston Marathon 2024, a ratio of about 2:1. Of those accepts, 12,535 are men, 9,440 women, 44 non-binary. I should point out, I got these figures from the BAA, the Boston Athletics Association, and of those, 6,182 exceeded the qualifying time by 20 minutes, 8,858 by 10 minutes and less than 20, and the remainder, 6,979, beat the cutoff point of 5 minutes 29 set this year by the Boston Athletics Association, and I was one of those. Of the runners, they come from 127 countries, all 50 US states. The minimum age is 18 and the maximum this year I think is aged 82. So there's 22,019 accepts, leaving a remainder of 7,981 participants. So who are they and how did they get in? Well, that 7,981 figure includes people who have not yet applied, who might be professional athletes, para-athletes, and I think it also includes there are 660 people. If you have run 10 consecutive Boston Marathons and you meet the qualifying time, but you don't have to meet the cutoff time, but you do have to meet the qualifying time, then you get to go into the Boston Marathon. So taking the 7,981, which is made up of a lot of different components, what the BAA say is they expect 80% of people to qualify for the Boston Marathon, which means 80% of 30,000 is 24,000, leaving 6,000 people who do not qualify for the Boston Marathon but take part. So let's see if that can be you. The easiest, least complicated way into the Boston Marathon is to buy your way in. If you raise more than $5,000 for charity, you get a place in the Boston Marathon. There are also international tour operators. So if you're an official travel partner of the Boston Marathon and the BAA, you guarantee entries to the Boston Marathon without the need to provide a qualifying time. Now I read that off the Irish International Travel Agent. So yeah, essentially you go on a travel agent, you get a guaranteed entry into the Boston Marathon. The cost of the tour package will vary depending on where you live. But looking at the Irish one, if you paid €2,029, you'd get 4 nights in a 4-star hotel in Boston. That's not too outrageous based on prices for the Boston Marathon. Obviously, they'll have booked them well in advance and have got them a lot cheaper. But nonetheless, for what you might get after you qualified at the Boston Marathon, that doesn't seem too bad. What is interesting is that there's a €645 per person entry fee. And that's a lot on top of that. I paid $235 to get in. And of course, in addition to that, you have to pay the airfare. And certainly with the Irish tour operator, you can only avail of that if you're from Ireland. And I'm expecting that applies to the other countries in the world. Now, it seems there is no US or Canadian option to avail of this international tour operator, which seems to me to be a little bit unfair. There are a couple of ways into the Boston Marathon that you can get without having to run a Boston qualifying time. And these probably don't apply to you, but one of them is you can get an invite if you run a quick half marathon and there's an expectation, a very quick one, probably a world standard one, and then there's an expectation that you will run a quick marathon for the first time, then you can get a place. Let's look at some of the random ways in. You could live nearby. There are various entries for people who live in cities and towns locally. I think that's a really good idea. By way of example, I think 287 people from the start point of Hopkinton are in this year's Boston Marathon. After the people who qualify through various standards and the sort of people living locally, it gets a bit muddy as how the others get in, but it seems to be made up of sponsors, media, and promotional special invites. You think, how would I get one of those? Well, I was reading about somebody who blogged for Adidas. They got one in because the sponsors. I had a bizarre meeting with a guy in Dublin. This was before I qualified for the Boston Marathon. He was in America. He was out drinking with some friends of mine. I was joining him. He ran the Boston Marathon because, ironically, he met a guy in a pub in Dublin who was from the organisation, and he got a place in the Boston Marathon. I was sitting thinking, really? But yeah, there are, of these 6,000 places, they've got to go somewhere. There are also some promotional special invites, and there's one way that I think is a great way in. My favourite way into the Boston Marathon was one that I hadn't realised even existed until last week. Abbott, who sponsored the Boston Marathon and all the other 5 major marathons in the world, Chicago, New York, Boston, Berlin, Tokyo, London, they sponsor all of those. And you have a dashboard. I have a dashboard at Abbott. You can log on and then it'll show you the ones you've run so far. And if you run 5 of the 6 major marathons, there are 150 places available for people who've run 5 out of 6 and want to get the 6th in Boston without qualifying. I think that's great. They have 2,000 places across the 6 majors, and it varies. I think sometimes a minimum of 3, and you can enter some of the marathons for some of these places. But effectively, you could run your way without having to be a very fast runner, and I think that is my favorite way into the Boston Marathon. So how would you start? Well, I would start with Chicago anyway. Apply for Chicago. It's the easiest, apparently, of all of the lotteries to get into. I got in there in first go. Maybe that's not statistically significant, but my understanding is it's the easiest one. I mean, I'd apply for several of them, if truth be told, and they're in spring and then they're in fall, autumn. So yeah, but Chicago was where I started. Then I applied for Berlin. I think I failed once with Berlin. I won the second time, ran Berlin. London, I failed the lottery twice. New York, I failed the lottery, but Strava had a virtual entry into the New York Marathon. So you ran a virtual marathon, and again, you had to. There was limited numbers of these, and you could get in. And so that's what I did. And once you've got 3 of these run, you will then get entry into some of the others via Abbott, which I'm certainly going to try and do for London and Tokyo. New York, I'm making a video about the New York Marathon because I'm going to run it, and it's a big long video I decided to do. But New York has some great ways in. I think it's got it really has the best ways in, and the Strava one is one of my favorite. Boston, I qualified this year in Rotterdam, and again, yeah, I'll keep going till I've got to run it first, and then try and do Tokyo and London. So let's say that you still want to qualify for the Boston Marathon. Well, you have to do the right training. You've got to run in the right gear. You've got to pick the right marathon and run it at the right time. Now, by way of example, I really want to run the Houston Marathon, but I would not pick that to try and set a personal best or Boston qualify, simply because it takes place, I think, in early January, and I would then have to forsake about a month of eating and drinking here in Ireland and the Christmas celebrations in order to be in peak condition for the Houston Marathon. So I wouldn't pick that. I'd pick a different marathon. One of my strategies to Boston qualify was simply to grow older. What I mean by that is to go up an age group. So I started when I was in the 55 to 59 age group, but I knew when I turned 60, the time would go down. Now, the age groups are roughly every 5 years, 30 and below, 35, 40, 45, and so on. And then as you grow older, they go down in time, or in terms of you can take longer. So maybe they go up in time. So you go, certainly, most times it's an additional 10 minutes every 5 years. When you turn 60, that actually goes to 15 minutes, and I think that might carry on. So I knew that when I turned 60, I had a better shot at qualifying for Boston. Now, what's interesting this time, I was trying to figure this out, and you can pop some comments down below, because I'm not sure I totally got the math wrong, but I was trying to think, when they applied a universal cutoff time of 5 minutes 29, I was trying to figure out, and that's for this year's marathon, I was trying to figure out, did that benefit slower or faster runners better? I think it benefits slower runners more. It's the same time for everybody, the 5:29. I think it benefits slow runners more because as a percentage of our overall time, the slower runners, it's lower than the faster runners, but every now and then I think, no, I'm completely wrong on that. It's much harder for an older person to run 5 minutes 29 quicker. But no, I think the statistical math of the percentage works. But yeah, let us know what you think. And is it fair? I mentioned picking a fast marathon. I looked at the world records: 1980 in Amsterdam, 1981 in Fukuoka, 84 in Chicago, 95 Chicago. These are men's, so twice in Chicago. Rotterdam, 85 and 88. London, 2002, and Berlin, 2003, 2007, 8, 11, 13, 14, 2018, 2022. So Berlin for men is a really fast marathon. It's also a really fast marathon for women. The 83 marathon record was set in Boston, then 84, 85, 2003, 2005, 2017, London, 1998, Rotterdam, 99, 2001, and recently 2023, Berlin and Chicago, 2001, 2002, and 2019. Now that's misleading, because you could think, right, I really need to go on world record courses, because that's where the very best athletes are running in the world. The very best athletes in the world don't run marathons that don't create much attention. I think very few would be running Rotterdam. They won't get the entry fee. And so, yeah, it's good to look at the really fast world record case marathons, but they're not necessarily the fastest ones or the ones you should enter to try and set a qualifying time. If I was trying to run a personal best in a new marathon, I would run Valencia. It has the fastest marathon debut ever, Kelvin Kiptum, 2 hours, 1 minute and 53 seconds. Another marathon in Spain that would be worth a look at, it's dubbed the world's fastest marathon, the Albatross Adventure Marathon. It's 1,938 meters drop, 6,358 over the course. So you'd have to train for running downhill, but it's apparently a fast course. There are various ones in the US that are billed as fast courses. I would really check them out. I ran the Jack and Jill Marathon. It said it was a fast marathon, but for me it wouldn't have been. There's very little crowd support, and we'll come on to that. But whichever one you want to do, you want to make sure it's approved for Boston and that it is genuinely fast for your type of running. If I had to pick one marathon that I would recommend above all the other ones I've run, it would be Rotterdam. I would say that because I qualified there inside the cutoff time for Boston 2024. I ran in 3 hours, 43 minutes and 29 seconds. Inside to what was the qualifying standard was 3 hours and 50 minutes for age 60 male. I managed to beat the cutoff time. I ran in 6 minutes 31 seconds below the qualifying time, which beat the cutoff time of 5 minutes and 29 by 1 minute and 2 seconds. So I squeaked in. Now, I don't think I squeaked in because of my efforts. I think because the one thing that's fantastic about Rotterdam is just when you're getting to that gnarly part of the marathon, when it's really getting tough, you run on the outward part of a dual carriageway or 2-lane road where people come in and there's no barriers, and the crowd come in, might be 11 feet wide, and they're 5 deep, 6 deep, and they're roaring. I mean, they didn't come to watch, they came to cheer. And yeah, that gave me a real boost, because you go out around a kind of lake, I think, and then you come back on the other side of the road, and I think at that point you have 2 or 3k to go, and they're screaming at you again, and that really was worth 1 minute and 2 seconds, as was all of your support. So yeah, thanks for helping me make it into Boston 2024. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it useful. If you did, it'd be great if you would hit the like button. As always, there'll be lots of stuff in the description below, and I'll happily answer any questions you put into the comments. There'll be a big blue subscribe button popping up there, and some great videos there. Thanks for watching. Till the next video, just keep running along.